In this video, I'm going to go over a few things that you can do on NUTBAL Online that you might not know about. To start out, I'm going to go to the Samples tab, and in previous videos we've looked at descriptions and reports pages, but we haven't looked at the status page, so I'm going to go there. And here you can look at the status of the samples that you have in our system. And if they've been completely finished and we've sent you your report back, they'll show up as these green rows. If they have been received by our lab, so what that means is that we've received your sample, and it's in the process of being dried, ground, and analyzed, it will show up in yellow and it'll have a 10 to 90% range. And finally, it'll show up in red if the sample number has been created, but it hasn't actually been received by the GAN lab, so we haven't gotten it started with processing. Maybe you've created a sample number at home and then the sample is in the mail and it hasn't arrived to us yet, but the sample exists and it's been started. So this is just something that if you're wondering where your sample is or about how far along your sample is in our system, you can always check on the sample status page. And then I'm going to go back to this reports dropdown that we looked at in the previous Interpreting Your NUTBAL Report video. So you'll see a row for each sample that has been submitted, and it will be brown all the way across if it's been a completed sample and we have a NUTBAL report for you, and if we haven't finished and provided you with your NUTBAL report, it will say sample not processed. So if you see this, you can go to that status page and check out how far along it is in the processing. The sample not processed just means we haven't actually completed a NUTBAL report, and we also don't have any of the fecal analysis information or the model prediction information. So you'll see it has the sample number, the sample date, the pasture that sample was taken from, and then you'll see that different samples, if they have multiple animal profiles, you can see all the profiles that are associated with that sample number. Along the top of the table is this key with the icons under the reports columns, and the icons are also all clickable. Most of them will provide you with a pop-up on your NUTBAL Online screen, except the submitted paperwork icon. That one will actually directly go to download on your computer. If you submitted a physical sample sheet, it'll download that PDF whenever we have it uploaded to the system. After your sample's been fully analyzed and we've generated a NUTBAL report at least once, you can go back and access the reports through these links. So you can access the report as the full case report, which includes everything that would have been included in your original email or mailed report that you received the first time. It also can be broken down into its smaller segments, so the standard report, which is that first part that goes through all of the model's predictions. If you had feeds, you can produce your feed mediation report, and then your NIRS report that includes the actual fecal analysis results. And again, the full case report will include all three of those. If you have an advisory, you could click that and just produce the advisory report itself. So that just gives you options so you don't have to do a huge document if you're not looking for all of that information. So now I'm going to go through some scenarios where you might want to edit these sample informations and rerun cases. So what you can actually do is change something about your animal's information if you realized after you've received your report that you've made a mistake in your sample description, or you just want to change the scenario to see hypothetically what would happen if you had younger animals on that pasture, or if you added a feed. You can edit that in your sample description, and then you'd be able to rerun your case. and basically regenerate a new NUTBAL report. So let's go back to this report that we looked at in the Interpreting Your NUTBAL Report video. So if you haven't watched that yet, then you might not be familiar with this report, but it's a mature cow who is 30 days pregnant, 120 days post-calving, that's losing just a little bit of weight. It's being supplemented with a pound of distiller's grains per day. So we want to try to address this weight change and see what we can do to prevent that, and how much distiller's grains we would need to add to prevent that weight loss. So if we scroll down to the nutritional mediation report, what we'll see is that the distiller's grains, under the supplemental feeding efficiency row, if we're feeding distiller's grains, what would address their requirements and allow them to maintain their current weight would be about 1.4 pounds of distiller's grains per head per day. And then it's going to account for what's actually being consumed. So really this 1.32 is the value that is needed for the cattle to consume and meet their requirements, but it's accounting for a little bit of waste. Let's also say that I wanted to add maybe a younger set of cows to see how they would do on this diet if you forgot to divide the herd into different age groups. So just as a reminder, ages from 1 to 5 need to be differentiated into different profiles to get the most accurate performance results, but after 5 years old, the model treats them pretty similarly as mature cattle. So I'll close out of this report, and then I'm going to go to my sample description page. So immediately I'll go to that sample that I wanted to edit. So here's that 6-year-old cow, and I'm going to add a new profile of a younger cow. So once I've added that profile, I'm going to hit save again, and then I'm going to go into the feeds tab, and I'm going to up this feed amount for the distiller's grains to that recommended amount of 1.4 pounds per head per day. So even though this feed is already shown up in the feeds table, to actually commit this new change, I have to hit add feed after I've changed it in this information. So after that, I'll save again. And if you ever want to see these changes that you make, so if you go back and regenerate different scenarios, this history tab will have a log of them. So if you wanted to view those again to know what your original scenario was, you can go back, use these parameters, and edit that information back to your original parameters from your first NUTBAL report. Okay, so now I've added that profile, I've upped the feed, and I've saved the description. And I'm going to go back to this reports page. So on the sample reports page, you'd go to the sample number that you've just edited, and you would select rerun case to rerun our performance model with the new animal and feed parameters. So let's look at the full case report now. So now the first profile that you see is this new profile. It's the younger cow, and her requirements are going to be a little bit higher than that mature cow. She's still going to be losing a little bit of weight. But if we go down to the mature cow, they're maintaining their weight, gaining just a little bit, and it looks like they'll see a slight increase in body condition over 30 days. And you can do this as many times as you want. With your report, you can go back and re-edit and change things and rerun all sorts of different scenarios. You can change just about anything in your sample description, but what you cannot change is the, scroll down to the bottom, the the weather data. So you'll see the model weather that pulls information from weather stations near your pasture's location coordinates. That's just going to be automatically pulled based on the day or the date and those coordinates for your pasture location. You also can't change the actual NIRS results. So the results that we get from analyzing your fecal sample, those are going to stay as well. So next I'm going to play a little bit with this sample report of a 8-month-old steer that I'm feeding a little bit of 24% protein cow cake, and I would like for it to gain 2 pounds per day, and it's currently just gaining 1.6 pounds per day. So unfortunately, currently with our mediation reports, they calculate for a weight change goal of 0. So for instance, I'm going to scroll down for this steer, and it's going to tell me that by feeding 0.75 pounds per head per day, that steer is going to maintain its weight. But as we want the steer to grow and also to put on additional weight, we can play around with NUTBAL to simulate different feeding scenarios to figure out a good way to meet this weight change goal. So I'm going to go back to the sample description page for that sample. So here's the 8-month-old steer. I'll go right to feeds, and I'm going to increase the cow cake to 4 pounds. Save description. And I'm going to rerun that case. And that 4 pounds just about meets the weight change goal. This about 0.5 difference is insignificant when it comes to the ultimate goal of what their body condition will be in 30 days. So this 4 pounds per head per day of the cow cake is a good amount to settle on. So another scenario, I'll pull up a new sample. So this is also a mature cow that is in the early stages of lactation and has pretty high nutritional requirements. Right now, she's being supplemented a pound per day of 30% crowed protein distillers grains, but still losing weight, and that's because the forage quality for a lactating cow is pretty poor. So what we're going to do is if we go down to the mediation report, it's going to recommend that we feed about 3 pounds of distillers grains to maintain her current weight, not be losing weight as she is lactating and probably also in the process of getting rebred. So let's go to her description for this sample. And so we'll go right to the feeds, and we'll up this distiller's grains to that recommended amount of 3 pounds per head per day. But let's say you might have some other feeding options and you would like to see what will be the least expensive to meet your animal's requirements. So let's put in a few different feed options. We'll do flaked corn. As you're adding these new potential feeds, you can leave the amount fed at 0, but make sure to fill out your minimum and maximum amount that you're willing to feed. Okay, so now that I have a few different feed options, I'm going to save description and go back to this reports page and rerun that case. So pulling it up, you'll see first they're still losing a little bit of weight, even though they're consuming that 3 pounds per head per day. That's why this weight change value is in red and the weight in 30 days is in red. But you also see that they're going to be maintaining their body condition score from when they started throughout the 30 days of this diet. So NUTBAL views that as a satisfactory performance, and that this weight loss is insignificant as far as the animal performance is concerned. And so with the feeds, you'll see all these new feeds, but just the distiller's grains is showing as being fed right now. And then we'll scroll down to the mediation report. And so now the mediation report has changed from the distiller's grains, and it's now actually recommending the corn gluten feed that I added. And what it recommends is feeding 3.3 pounds per day of that corn gluten feed. And if you scroll down to this sensitivity analysis, it's actually going to tell us the cost that I've entered for how much it costs to feed the other ingredients. And then on the right, it's going to be this cost that would make that supplement a more economical choice than the corn gluten feed that it recommended in the supplemental feeding efficiency section. So I'm going to go back to that report or sample description. So I've updated the feed to that recommended amount of corn gluten feed. I'm going to go back to the sample reports, rerun the case, and check out their performance now. And right now it actually has their weight change right at 0. So they are meeting their protein requirements with a little bit of excess, meeting their energy requirements. So they're not going to be putting on much weight, but they'll be maintaining their body condition throughout this lactation period. And then again, you can view what their diet looks like with that supplemented corn gluten feed compared to when it's just the forage alone. So those are just a few different ways that you can play around with your NUTBAL online results and your sample cases, different ways that you can regenerate and just test out different scenarios. So that's kind of an additional tool that takes a little bit of playing around with to use, but if you do it's a neat way to check out the potential effects of different feeding management situations. And again, if you are playing around with this and you need some help, you're always welcome to give us a call or shoot us an email, and we're happy to help you learn how to use NUTBAL and make it an effective tool for your operation.